How you guys doing? This is Erik Velie. Started a new podcast series called Liquidated. For those of you guys that don't know me, I'm Grimace85 on Twitter. Also Erik Velie. I'm the Crypto Fight Night Heavyweight Champion. I'm also a CT native since 2013. This is my third cycle in the space. For more or less, I'm a Bitcoin maxi for all the people that aren't going to like that out here. But I've had the fortune and pleasure, or been fortunate enough to meet some of the biggest names in the space and go on vacations and trips and become very close friends with many of the big names in CT, whether it be founders, traders, or other people, Coles, people that you don't want to meet, people that you do want to meet. And I think it'd be important, or at least to interview people and their origin stories in this space, get a good idea of each cycle, the type of people that are in these cycles, who's making money, who isn't making money, insiders, all nefarious types of people as well. And so what I'm trying to do is each week or each other week, bring on someone on the show, get their origin story, get their interactions in the space, how they become successful. So maybe some of you guys can, take their advice and perform and do well in the future, and also learn some lessons that we've already had to learn the hard way on our own. So today I have Nico from Ox on the space. I think he just recently left Ox, but he was the CEO. So I'm going to try to bring him on now. Hey, Nico, how you doing?
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you're on Bali right now?
Oh, I am in Bali right now. What mic are you using, by the way?
We're using one of those mics on the Sony. My production guy's in the bathroom right now, so.
Okay. From my end, it sounds pretty harsh. It sounds like a very kind of like airplane mic quality.
Okay, we got a couple other mics, so let's pause it real quick, go from there. So Nico, before I brought you on, I gave a quick introduction of Liquidated and basically said, I've been a CT native since 2013. I've gone through my third cycle now. I'm basically a Bitcoin maxi, which some people may or may not like for listening to this chat, but I've had the pleasure of meeting most of the influential people in the space, whether they're famous or infamous, and I think all their origin stories are very important, especially for young people in crypto trying to figure out how they're going to make it, how they're going to do well, or whether or not they want to enter the space, and also to tell some pretty interesting stories that really haven't been told. I know they made a few crypto movies. All of them have been terrible. Documentaries are horrible. So I'm trying to interview, the real people in CT that have been in the space, that have gone through the ups and downs, the highs and lows, and I know dozens of them. So I'm going to bring someone on every couple of weeks, and then also going to have Pwn Lord 69 on, who's still knee deep in on-chain stuff in the trenches to help some other people that are in that world. I know that you like doing memes as well, but you recently just left Ox, right?
Yeah, correct. I'm just helping out, advising the guys, taking some time off, a little bit of a step back, mainly just focused right now on trading myself within the market. I like to do honestly quite a big mixture of like major perp trading, on-chain, slightly, let's call it slightly more legit coins, non-meme coin stuff. Recently, there was some alt ones that were launching I was trading, and then also a fair amount of memes, all the way from slightly larger ones for bigger swings, but also like, pre-bonded, PumpFun, pre-migrated coins, stuff like that.
So how did you get into CT? Like, what's kind of your origin story? Where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, went to university in Birmingham, did a chemistry degree. Couple years in, didn't really feel like it was what I wanted to be doing. I kind of first got exposed to crypto back in like 2015, 2016, had some friends who were building CSGO casinos who were, off-ramping money with crypto or doing various shady kind of things. And I kind of like bought some then and let it ride, but wasn't really like following the space too much, just kind of had some dust left over from back in the day. And so when I was pretty bored at university of doing chemistry shit, I can't even remember how. I think I just like saw some videos or something, came across crypto again, and for whatever reason, it very much kind of piqued my my interest, and I just started kind of going all in terms of learning everything. Some of the guys I went to university with went on to like, build PumpFun. Some others I worked with, we kind of like did some startups I'm still friends with today. They're still in the space, all doing really cool stuff. Some of them are Hyperliquid whales, some of them are doing other things. And so that was kind of how I got into things. Worked on various things, but just was always on a mission to learn more, pretty much.
And from your age group, and how old are you?
I'm 24 now.
So when you're in college and you are going through this whole crypto process, is it more the age group of you guys are like, okay, this is one of the few ways that I can make it and
Nah, I mean,
build wealth, or did you find it interesting and like thought you believed in the space and believed in the products, or
yeah, I mean, I think I personally had a lot of interest for it. I think that crypto is it's like a very stimulating industry if you're the kind of person who's receptive to it. There's just constantly new things going on. It's like a 10x simulator of the real world, pretty much. Everything's like a week in TradFi is like it's like a month in crypto most of the time. At least how it feels and how much is going on, how much is changing. So it just very much stuck out to me. But I think that honestly it still remains quite a niche, like minority choice or option for a lot of people. I think that it's just a couple outliers who do particularly well, make it seem like all of a sudden all the young people doing it. But I do think generally you're seeing more of a shift to crypto type things from young people. I think very much crypto is a young man's game, and like for crypto and to be bullish and things to be adopted more as time goes on, what you need is the young people to adopt it more, because it's not going to be the older guys, who are stuck in their ways and don't want to accept this like somewhat new technology or and stuff like that. So it's a very much a young person's game, but I still think it remains fairly like on the edge for most people. Like the guys who are really deep into it and really like working and on CT every single day, I think that's a very small group of people.
yeah, I definitely feel like I'm an old man in the space. But kind of like GCR said, he thought memes were going to be a big thing even before they came out. And it seems as though the people are getting the space are one, a lot of the kids your age think there's not really a way to make it other than, be able to get in that 100x in the crypto. So they want to gamble and go do that. And two, a lot of guys that are really good at PvP games or, you know, just been playing video games their whole life. And a lot of these guys end up becoming traders. They end up being very successful. So it
Yeah.
just depends how you see crypto as just a video game for money where people are doing PvP and trying to make it, or they're investing just in Bitcoin and believing it and think it's going to go up.
Yeah, honestly, crypto feels like a video game more and more to me. Like these days, there's so many more social and other elements to it that make it so fun and make it very, very easy to kind of see and track your progression. And especially, I think in the meme coin space, people are getting very used to trading with their friends via Discord, for example, or something like that. And it very much reminds me, like I used to be a big gamer as well when I was younger. It was literally where I spent like 16 hours a day doing. And it just kind of feels like that. It feels exactly the same. The only difference is that now you've added a financial element, and very much I feel like being in crypto, if you're not like directly working for a protocol or something like that, it's really just like anything else. You're working for yourself, and you're effectively trading and looking for, I guess, looking for your edge and looking for pockets of opportunity here and there. I think very few are able to play a little bit of everything very well. Most of the guys I've seen and I know who've done well have done extremely well on one or two pretty make it players. It's pretty hard to win on every front in crypto because you're having to keep track of so many moving parts. But it's definitely possible. And I think the space definitely has a lot of opportunity. But anytime someone says to me that crypto is like easy, I mean, if it's easy for them, then good on them. That's great to hear. But like, I think this industry is like anything else. You're competing against a lot of other people. You got to fucking grind. You got to work hard. But if you do it and you get there, like it definitely pays off.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though at least the people that I, are in my group chats that have these big moments, where they hit a 1,000x or 100x, or they have these big swings, a lot of them end up round tripping 80% of it or 90% of it. How do you stay disciplined? And what do you recommend to a younger kid out there that hit a big lick on something? And,
Yeah.
what goals or what do you write down for yourself to make sure that you don't end up round tripping these big numbers? Because I've seen guys go from 50 million to 5, and if I
Yeah.
did that, I would be sick.
Yeah. So I mean, there's two ways you go to 50 mil and then go back to 5. Either you're holding spot and you have complete moon targets, and then you don't have any kind of conception of like, okay, maybe this trade is no longer the same trade I took. Maybe this new information, maybe this is not the same case anymore. Maybe I should consider taking a 50% profit instead of 100% profit, because it'd be better to make money than eventually maybe be back at break even or lose money, right? I think this is the case of a lot of like hyperliquid whales right now that got airdropped a fuck ton of tokens, and they're like, well, I could have sold this thing at $30. Now it's at 10 or 15. Like, is my thesis the same? Am I still as bullish on this thing then as I am now? And I think for a lot of them, that's the case. The other option is you're like trading perps or something, and you're just trading with like no stop losses. You're just going full Rambo on the market, and you just eventually maybe you're not even a good trader to begin with. Maybe you're not even looking at the right things, and you're just getting wrecked. I think that the 2 or 3 things you need to do because I think I've been quite lucky. I've not round tripped that much. I've like always put aside a lot of my profits. One is, I think when you're initially taking the trade, like you hear it all the time, and I used to hear it all the time and never do it. It's like being disciplined about what your invalidation is, what your stop loss is when you take a trade in the first place. Like you should always know like what is the max risk here, because you need to establish your max risk. If it hits that invalidation, like say -5%, -10%, close the trade, look at it again. Is this still a trade you want to be in the first place? You know what I mean? Like maybe the situation is different. The next one is, once you're up like a certain amount, I like to always move my validation to somewhat at least break even, and if not like slightly in profit, so that if it gets back to there, I can always reopen the trade. I can always take the trade again and or switch direction, but at least I've like made a little bit of money as opposed to being break even or losing money. And most of the time you can do that once you're far enough away from your entry, right? And then the next one is, whether you make like 100K on a meme coin or on a crazy trade, these days in this market, especially with Bitcoin dominance, I think just generally increasing, and alt season looking less and less likely, and things like ETH looking like they're trending more and more towards zero. I'm no oracle. I can't say whether I think ETH is going to go to all-time highs again or not, or if it's kind of a bit too heavy. But generally, I think in this space, if you make real big money, like you should be taking like 80 to 90% of it and just whacking it to the side in stables. Because just because you made like, let's say 100K on a meme coin, like, okay, yes, objectively, that means you had a win in the realm of crypto, but it doesn't mean you know anything or have any skill with regards to trading majors or predicting the direction of the rest of the market, especially when the entire crypto market is mainly dependent on macro and like the S&P and the dollar and all these other things anyway. So like, just because you won in this tiny little arena that was one shitcoin on Solana and you made 50K doesn't mean you're probably going to be right about the rest of the market. And so you saw this with a lot of guys who did very well on certain airdrops. Like I just use Hyperliquid as an example because it was recent,
Well, I
where
think a
maybe
lot of the
they
hyper
made.
liquid traders weren't great traders. They got
That's
bailed
what I
out,
mean.
and
Yeah.
they need to know that they're not a genius. They got bailed out and to take profit. So no offense to any of these guys out here, Hyperliquid. I'm a Hyperliquid fan myself. So
Yeah, I think you just need to establish that there's a clear difference between making $1 million on one thing and being a trader and predicting where the market's going to go. And so what I think I saw this cycle that I was very glad to see was a lot of these younger kids who came from gaming backgrounds and came to the Solana trenches and made money. They weren't here for the tech. They weren't here for the long-term vision of crypto. They weren't here to believe in something. They came, they saw, they conquered, they made money in the trenches, and then they just whacked most of it into stables and walked away. They weren't trying to, think that whether Solana is going to go to 300 or 400 or whatever it is, and potentially suffer some losses right now as Sol is dumping back to like 125 and maybe lower. But yeah, it's. I think you just have to know what your edge is. Are you a trader on the macro sense or not? And if you made money on something else, know when to take profit and put in stables and put it to the side. And when you make enough money, like start thinking about how you're your income can become maybe slightly safer. It might sound like a bit of a bitch answer. Like I'd love to just like YOLO like all my bags like back into like Bitcoin and or Soul or whatever it is, and make another like 50, 100%. But I think you gotta pick the right time.
Yeah, I think it really just goes back into discipline and something I try to do every cycle. And I think it takes at least one cycle of going broke before you even figure out how to make money in this space. And I know a lot of guys have gone 3 cycles and then they end up selling the top the 3rd time and do really well the 4th time if they get to the 4th cycle. But usually it takes 3 cycles to make it, in my opinion. But I usually write down my goals before the cycle starts, where I want to sell, where I want to go, and hopefully I have the discipline to do that. So I think it's a good recommendation to do if you're holding spot most of the time. But you're living in a completely different world. I mean, if you're a trader, I mean, the highs and lows of that is pretty remarkable. So you know much more about that. Well, the PumpFun team, maybe I'll have one of them on at some point. But where do they think the market is going to go, and how did they get this idea? This small group of guys, with low income, start this huge thing.
Okay, I guess 2 things. So first one, I don't think they're like very public about where they think the market is going or anything. I mean, it's clear from the fact that they sell most of their Solana that they at least prefer dollars right now. I don't think that's necessarily a comment on whether they think or not Solana's going higher or lower. It's more just they probably don't want to take on the risk of it. They just want to take the 1% that they take at that time or around there. And then I think with respect to how they built it, I mean, they were all in the space for a good amount of time before they did PumpFun. They came from an NFT kind of background, so they were always on the sort of edge case, riskier stuff within crypto, where there was a lot of potential upside. I think they liked the friend tech bonding curve style model and wanted to find ways to get that kind of level of virality with a mechanism that was pretty sound and quite accelerationist, let's say, in the sense that, these coins with bonding curves can rocket up very high. They can also go down very quickly. They were pretty deep in memes. A lot of them made money on a lot of the big memes. And so I think through a mixture of their own ideas that they had and ideas other people gave them, I think they kind of decided to put together the concept of memes and bonding curves and create this launch pad. And when you really think about it, the concept of PumpFun is really nothing revolutionary or groundbreaking or particularly complex, but just applied to the right market and given to the right audience and created with the right kind of vibe that it had. It just was able to
First to
capture
market.
a lot of first to market too. But I mean, you've seen a lot of other launchpad type projects try to do well and actually fail on the distribution. And I think that one part of PumpFun that was kind of underplayed was just kind of just how it was like built and the general vibe and their general approach to user feedback and the community. There's many things they didn't address, and many things I'm sure people wanted they didn't create, and I'm sure they had their reasons for that. But it's not like PumpFun was really the first like meme coin launchpad. There were other tools and stuff that didn't take the same approach to distribution and branding that allowed you to like launch tokens easily, and that didn't necessarily catch on. It was like the way that PumpFun, I think, actually delivered it to the market and who they knew and who they got on it and how they got people involved to begin with. That really was like the reason it was so successful, at least in the early stages. After that, I think it just went pretty parabolic because people loved it. But yeah.
Do you know like how these coal things work and these groups that they come together and they kind of pump these coins? You might not have been involved in that stuff, but how does that work? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved with these things. I've gone and stuff. I mean, you just have to remember that in crypto, almost everyone is exit liquidity for someone else at some point, right? And so what does it even mean to be exit liquidity? It's like just a function of where you are on the life cycle of this coin, in terms of, everything has a sphere of influence. How close are you to the is epicenter maybe the right word? Think of where an earthquake starts, right?
Yeah.
Maybe timely with what's happening in Bangkok right now. But whoever first creates this coin and their initial circle is very much like the epicenter. And then it's kind of like a spider web out from there, right? Who do those people know? And who do those people know? And so on and so on and so on. And then there are certain levers or you can kind of apply to that. Like maybe you make some content, maybe you run some ads, maybe you pay someone to share something, even though they didn't really care about it in the first place. And now it goes to their audience and so on and so on. So it's just all this KOL stuff, whatever. Like people can try and hate. And like, yes, there are certain ethics that it would be nice to see if you wanted to remain and kind of promote a certain level of morality within the space. But at the end of the day, it's just like, where are you on that curve of, is there someone else after me who's going to find this interesting, funny, or do they still consider it undervalued or not? Or am I the last buyer? And you need to try to figure out like where you lie on that curve. And then you can really like start to make money on maybe a KOL calling something because maybe what other KOLs after them are going to call it, who's in their network that they might onboard afterwards. How early were you to even see this call in the first place? Like, you can talk about all these things all you want, but there's money to be made at, in my opinion, at like every juncture. You just need to know what the game is you're playing.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about memes. I guess they all start the same way with a small group of people. They're kind of in the know or insiders. And I kind of stayed out of the whole cool stuff, and I think I'm not a big fan of the ethics of it, but at the end of the day, you're playing a PvP game. People think, the game is the game, as they quote in The Wire. And everyone's trying to make money and do the best they can. But I do think retail, it's good to talk about this and to understand what coal is and marketing these coins before they get to the retail market. So they understand that, it's really you're buying, to sell to someone that's going to enter the market later. And I saw a lot of the big names actually in crypto as the cycle started getting shorter and shorter, putting huge size in some of these meme coins and losing $3-4 million, firing any of these coins. So I think eventually everyone kind of takes it a little bit, but some people did pretty well in this cycle.
One tip I would give that I felt like made a big difference for me, especially over the last couple of months, especially with the meme coin kind of stuff. It can get so easy after you have 1 or 2 wins to think you're the shit and size way too heavy into things. And I honestly think most people in this space would do far better if every time they wanted to size into a trade, they just took like 50% of the size that they wanted to use. Until they like consistently are making good moves and are profitable and really trust themselves. I think people will just allocate too much.
Yeah, I think that's one thing Ponzi Trader told me about is he would take profits and move money off the exchange and kind of start over with the balance he had before and kind of if he bricked that he'd reload. But eventually that was a good way of doing it. But I think there's a certain psychology to being in this space that normal people aren't used to. Like I gain and lose millions of dollars all the time and I feel nothing. But it took years and years to feel that way. It sounds crazy, but it's like people think I'm nuts still that are normal people because I hold Bitcoin and I hold Bitcoin with this size, but it's a weird, thing that you kind of adopt over time. I'd rather hold, and most people in crypto would rather hold their crypto than buy real world assets, which has always been a shock to me. I always recommend some people get some in real world assets or real estate just so you have that liquidity, that's hard to access rather than just, clicking a couple of buckets and losing it. But not to be a doomer, we're at a certain point of the cycle right now where I think we still might have some room left, but it's time to prepare, for some taking some risk off the table, maybe.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Tell me about how you met Kyle and Zoo and how you got into Ox and what kind of opportunity that was and how that whole process went.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I met Sue at an event. I think it was back in Hong Kong, maybe a year or so ago, a little bit more. Just got chatting to him about various things, and at the time was pretty like deep in the Solana meme side of things. They were in the very early stages of Oxfun at the time. Sue obviously then introduced me to Kyle back then and the rest of the team. And I think that at the time, Ox had a very solid base of infrastructure to allow trading leverage on very like long tail assets and using multiple forms of things as collateral by assigning things pretty good, like loan to value ratios, meaning you could trade with stables or ETH or Bitcoin and use that as collateral to then go and trade memes and stuff like that. So I very much leveraged a lot of my connections in the more trench style things, and the fact that I was keeping a very close eye on which memes were doing well and which ones were not, to basically be able to bring on and allow trading of a lot of these memes by listing them very early. And a lot of them then went up a lot from there. Things like Retardio, Giga, SPX, like these were all things we were focusing on when they were at like 20 mil market cap, and many of them went to 2, 3, 7, 800 mil market caps. And you know, it was a very good it was a really, really good experience in terms of like, how do you build a user base, how do you build somewhat of a community, how do you react to the market as it's changing. You saw things like the whole AI, what do you call it, the AI meme coin, AI infra season with AI16Z and virtuals and all this stuff, and these were all things that we were very much adapting to and making sure that we could provide to our users constantly. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we were able to grow the product a lot. Working with Stu and Kyle was also really good. These are guys with pretty much like over a decade of experience in markets in general, and I think at least half of that being crypto. And they have a very unique way of looking at things. I think they're very intelligent guys. They're also extremely hardworking. So a lot of the other guys within the Ox team as well, getting to work with guys like Lucas and stuff like that. So it was a really good way to expand my horizons, work on something pretty cool, especially on the exchange side of things. I think that it very much improved my ability and mindset as a trader specifically, just because when you really see how perp trading works a bit more behind the scenes with regards to market making, to sizing, to kind of long short bias of traders and funding rates and all these kinds of things. It just makes you much, much more finely attuned to what does it even mean to be a good trader or a bad trader, and what does it mean to like have a high hit rate, and what kind of behaviors do you typically see from those kinds of traders. And it was like even more complex because the entire exchange was running on, well, it still is, running on the Ox token. So you have this kind of quadratic profitability, quadratic P&L, where when you're winning, potentially you can be winning even harder. But when you're losing, you could be losing even harder based on the price action of another asset. So it means that to truly, truly maximize your profit at every stage, you're not just taking the single trade you're taking, you're also taking into account the entire mechanism and profitability and everything of the exchange you're trading on, which is like a pretty unique experience. So now when I trade on Hyperliquid, it's like, it feels like I'm trading on easy mode in some way.
Yeah, we'll get to the Hyperliquid discussions in a little bit. I know there's some happening with Binance and I think Ox was involved in some respect, but like Zoo and Kyle are pretty polarized figures in the space. I know the last cycle they were, to me and to all my groups of friends, like gods. Like they knew no wrong and were the billionaires in the space. And a lot of my friends were cutting checks to be a part of their funds and things of that nature. And then obviously FTX happened and all these other things happened. What made you put your trust and faith to work with them? And what did you end up, it sounds like you have really positive things to say about them, but like, what have you learned from them? What have you learned from their resilience and trying to come back from kind of the negative things that have happened in the space with them? And I met Zoom myself in Singapore. I thought for sure I live in a simulation meeting him, because I just didn't expect to see him. But he was a friendly guy, and he seemed extremely intelligent. But what was your thought process before you started work with them, and how do you feel about their ethics and their work and the things that they've done?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple ways of, I think, looking at many situations in life in general. Some people look at perceived to be negative situations and like want to steer clear of them, or don't think that there's like potentially opportunity. But I think that oftentimes where there's the biggest losses, right? Maybe in the case of 3AC, looking at still how successful they were prior to that was like no accident. right? Like, yes, mistakes were made. Whose mistakes that were they? I don't know. These situations are very complex with lots of people. I don't think single people can be put at fault. But
Right.
these are guys with great legacy, with great experience in the markets, with great networks. And I'm not here to comment on like things that happened between them and other people in the past. I wasn't involved in those situations at all. But I still, felt like these guys had a ton of experience and were able to impart a lot of knowledge. Um, and even if you take it from the perspective of learning from other people's mistakes, like 3AC blow up and all these other things were, it's like one of the biggest mistakes if you think about it that way in the market. So you could all even think of it in that way and think, how do I learn from what the guys who once were part of
I
one
mean,
of these biggest fuck
I
ups and
definitely
try
think
not to
they
do it
got.
myself.
I definitely think they got hunted by FTX towards the end. So like a lot of that has to do with some weird stuff that was happening with FTX, in my opinion. I personally love redemption arcs. I've been the bad guy in situations in my life, but the people that kind of make the world go around and put the work in and do the stuff really can prove themselves. Like look at Trump in his last election. Look at this election. Like look at the things he's doing now. Like so, I like when people can prove people wrong, and it seems like they're trying to do that. Ox seems like it's moving along quite well. What happened with the whole liquidity issue that happened? I don't know if it was a month ago about the funds not being in Ox. Well, it seemed kind of baseless to me. But what was your impression of that, or how did you address
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, and this is actually an even better conversation now, considering what happened with Hyperliquid recently. I'm just placing some stop losses on my soul shorts.
And if you want,
Um,
segue that into the Hyperliquid thing, because I don't understand this stuff as much as you do, and I'd love to hear about it.
yeah, for sure. So, with regards to Ox, what happened is that a user pretty blatantly placed a very large short on Ox while also selling the coin in large amounts on chain. And so, as per the terms of service, his account was at least temporarily frozen and kind of withheld of funds being withdrawn because that's what exchanges do in these situations when users blatantly break terms of service. The
Right.
guy who did it even then like went on a space and like admitted to everything he did, but there was a lot of backlash. It was like a pretty big public thing. I think mistakes were made on Ox's side with regards to addressing things punctually and generally that kind of thing. And so in the end, we released the guy's funds, but not the profits that he made on the trade that was done. What's the word? Illicitly, I guess.
And then he ended up being okay with that.
Yeah, in the end, everything was okay, but I think like reputation is sometimes there can still be some work to do to obviously build back up trust. I know the guys are going to be releasing some like proof. There was some completely zero evidence to be provided behind some claims around insolvency and all this kind of stuff. It was like literally
Yeah.
just people larping and funning on the timeline.
It's funny
There's
how
like no
CT runs with that
truth
stuff,
behind
though.
that.
It's like it's very
Yeah,
detrimental. You know what I mean?
honestly, yeah, I respect it. I mean, game is game. I'd love to also get 1 million impressions on all of my tweets. So, and you see, it's like you're kind of seeing it recently, like last couple of days. There was the morning routine coin that ran pretty hard. There was a giblification coin that ran pretty hard. You're seeing a pretty interesting narrative right now where when a trend gets caught, it really fucking goes. Like it pops off. And so, like, if you're able to catch some of these coins pretty early, or capitalize on making some content about these trends early, then you can get some views, you can make some money. At the end of the day, you're catching waves. I think that's what half of crypto is. It's just catching waves. The tide comes in, the tide comes out. Sometimes the waves are bigger, sometimes the waves are weaker. If you can be a kind of like a good lifeguard on the beach and see what the fuck's going on, and jump out there with your board and catch some waves, you do well.
The cycle of these waves seems to be going faster and faster. Though, am I wrong?
Yeah, yeah, faster and faster, bigger and smaller. I think again, it's very dependent on the general state of the market, the price of Solana, uh, the state of the infra around memes and all this kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean,
Things are
I
becoming
think I
much
was
more
up
PvP.
300K on my USA position and went to like 15 grand in like a day. So
Yep,
very
yeah,
fun,
these
very
things
fun
can
stuff.
happen exactly. But
This is
it's
why
a
I
lot
just
of
hold
fun.
Bitcoin. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun.
And then I
So
guess
what about the
Hyperliquid, was about
Hyperliquid
Hyperliquid.
situation? Yeah, yeah.
So Hyperliquid was again a very similar situation to what happened a couple weeks ago with like the big HLP whale who was taking like 400 mil longs and shorts on Bitcoin. But basically, the way that HLP on Hyperliquid works, which is like the automated market making strategy, is this guy was able to, I believe he took a pretty big short on Hyperliquid. He had it spread across a couple of accounts. Total he had was, I believe, around 7 mil of margin split across 2 or 3 accounts. And what he then did was, he had a bunch of jelly, and he was basically like, buying and selling jelly on chain to somewhat manipulate the price of the perp market. And so then what he does is he or the way this kind of strategy works is he then withdraws part of the margin in his account, which basically increases his effective leverage on his short position on Hyperliquid. And so what happens is that Hyperliquid has to, the way the HLP mechanism works is that when that position eventually gets liquidated, it has to lift your position, right? Like, maybe participants in the market forget, but every trade you take, someone's got to take the opposite side of that trade. So when his trade is being liquidated, there's got to be someone who basically takes on that position. You can't just have that position disappear into nowhere. And so HLP then takes on that position and was like realizing, like, not realizing, but had like 10 to 30 mil in short P&L negative. And so I think when the rest of CT started to pick up on this, like this is the first case where this kind of trickery or exploit had been done on a fairly illiquid coin. Like prior to this, I think Jelly was at like in the ranges of like 10 to 30 mil market cap, something like that, 20 mil, let's call it. It had been kind of like been pumped up a little bit in the days prior to this happening. I think a lot of people were trying to just trade futures on it and stuff around some news, maybe of the Jelly founder doing some stuff. Now you've seen some people bidding up Vine in a similar way for probably similar reasons, but I don't think it's not listed on Hyperliquid, so no one's going to be exploiting it. But a lot of big Chinese accounts started to tweet at Yihei, who is kind of the listings manager at Binance, and also CZ, basically telling them to list Jelly because obviously the initial listing will probably make the coin go up because all the users on Binance are going to see it and buy it.
I'll call you back.
Jelly
Sorry,
goes up.
Barney was calling
If they list it, no problem. If Jelly was to pump because Binance and maybe other exchanges list it, then the short position that Hyperliquid took on by lifting it from the liquidator would obviously be like massively in loss, which would massively harm HLP and its P&L, which would then cause depositors into HLP to get scared and want to withdraw from it, which would then reduce the liquidity available to Hyperliquid and HLP to be used to even liquidate positions and perform general market making in the first place. It would be insane. So Chinese accounts tweeted them. Binance does a pretty scummy thing and goes ahead and lists Jelly. OKX soon after decides to follow and does the same thing, causes Jelly to do a bunch of pumping. It would have fucked Hyperliquid a lot, but what Hyperliquid basically did was, I guess, kind of override the Oracle set a fair price on which to ADL, which is basically auto deleveraging, which is just like closing everyone's positions who's trading Jelly on Hyperliquid, and subsequently then also delist it so that no one else can trade it. And I think they were pretty much able to mitigate almost all of the losses to HLP by closing at that favorable price. And I think I can't remember exactly the details, but most of the users whose positions were closed at, I think for most of the users, pretty fair and optimal prices. So somewhat crisis averted, but it's definitely going to knock some confidence. I mean, HLP had like 100 mil net outflows in terms of withdrawals, which obviously is like not great, but it's to be expected.
What was their solution? They had another solution after that, just in case this happens again. Was it something about validators or something?
Yeah, I mean, like this is kind of the whole debate about like, is Hyperliquid truly decentralized? Like, what really is like on and off chain and stuff like that. Let me just double check their Twitter.
I mean, it definitely seems like
They're
like
upgrading to a
sexes are,
fully on-chain validator,
yeah,
is what they're kind of
yeah.
talking about,
And what do
to
you think
vote for
about
asset
that as
delisting.
a solution?
I think it probably is the right thing to do, and I think it's very fair. In my experience at Ox, we were listing a lot of shitcoins all the time, and many of these things ran up super high. That's why we listed them in the first place. And then we had to often delist things because they went, eventually trended to zero or close to that, especially like, sub 10 mil, sub 5 mil, sub 3 mil. And at these points, these coins are so illiquid, being at that market cap, that they're so volatile, or at least can be manipulated like so easily, that you either have to, just fucking like ban everyone who's manipulating them, which is like complicated, and
Yeah,
there's definitely ways for people to exploit without getting caught. Uh, or you need to just set insanely low position and leverage limits on these coins, to the point that trading them, or even open interest caps, that trading them is like not even really worth it. And most of the time, funding is going to be super one-sided and stuff like that. So it's very hard to have like a market maker or another user like be on the other side of that trade all the time. So yeah, I think it's the right way to go about things, especially like if there is an exploit or something that is happening that is potentially harming all of the other users on the exchange. Not only with regards to the positions they may be taking on that market, if their positions being manipulated by a big person, but also just general, depositors to HLP and things like that. These guys should be protected and not be harmed by exploiters. So if the right move is to do it this way, then I think totally fine by me. I think it's very fair. I think anyone who thinks otherwise is probably doesn't understand how these things work, or is overreacting slightly.
I mean, everything I've heard about Hyperliquid is they have an extremely ethical team, and they've done things pretty well from what I've heard. But it seems as though the sexes are really kind of scared of Hyperliquid, and it might be a game changer. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on Hyperliquid and their viability and ability to stay, a big name in the space?
Uh, I mean, I think Hyperliquid's great. I don't think that it's about replacing sexes necessarily. There's a reason sexes exist. I mean, the concept of how decentralized is Hyperliquid in the first place, the fact that they were able to basically have a validator set go and ADL Oracle prices and delist markets and all this kind of stuff. The reality is you kind of need some of this control to prevent and punish users who are doing potentially illegal or harmful things to other users, and things that are against terms of service. And it is in a decentralized protocol that's very hard to do. Um, in my opinion, the biggest edge of Hyperliquid is firstly the being able to trade on chain with no KYC. So we'll have to see how long they can get away with that, because there's definitely going to be a point where some regulators are going to want to try to step in and do something about that. Uh, whether that be policing Hyperliquid directly, or policing more at the on and off ramp kind of stage. I very much believe crypto will continue to function as its own kind of decentralized little bubble on chain. And if I was TradFi, if I was the regulators, I'd be looking much more as to how do I police the off ramping part. You know, consider crypto its own little bubble, but I'm going to police people and tax people and everything when they try to get out, right? I think that's the easiest thing to do. It doesn't really matter too much what happens inside at the end of the day. Um, at least if you're not like trying to think too much about like what's income tax or what's capital gains. So that's the KYC part of Hyperliquid. The next part is, custody of your own funds and stuff like that. Uh, Again, you're kind of depositing to the Hyperliquid L1 and stuff like that. So, it's probably about as custodial as you're going to get for using a solution or product as fine tuned as Hyperliquid. But it's definitely much better than having your funds on a centralized exchange where you can like literally be like banned or have funds frozen. I mean, Mexi is pretty well known for doing this kind of thing. I think most people I know have been okay, but a lot of these kind of exchanges have pretty sketchy practices and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just think you definitely want to be it's not that you don't want to use them, but I just think you want to be very aware of like what you're putting on them and what you're risking when you put it on there, because they definitely do have like control of your account, and their processes around proving who's right or who's wrong in certain situations is going to be very tedious. And I don't know whether you're going to want to go down that legal battle. So maybe Victory Law Group wants to go ahead and, you know, try and help users with funds on exchanges in some way.
I definitely see some very interesting potential class cases like all the time. For me, like, do I want to get in a 5-year legal battle to make 8 figs? I don't know, but
Yeah,
the answer is probably no for me. But there is some serious lawsuits that are going to happen on a lot of these exchanges, especially if they're just operating mainly in the U.S. That being said, I think the Hyperliquid and decentralized exchanges, I'm curious to see if BNB tries to come out with a product or something to compete with that or something or something else. I don't know. It seems as like that's a possibility. What for some of these CT guys that are getting started into crypto? How do you feel about hard wallets and are you making sure that a good portion of your crypto is on a hard wallet all the time? And how do you differentiate between your hard wallet, your hot wallet, and that all that fun stuff? Crypto security.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, use a VPN, make sure everything's password protected, make sure you have 2FA, make sure even 3FA with an email and a phone number and a biometric and all these kinds of things, like standard practices.
Right.
If you have a large amount of stables or Bitcoin or EtherSol or any large position, if you don't plan on touching it and you don't need the freedom and flexibility of being able to move it around or enter and exit quickly at will regularly, yes, you're probably much better off putting it on a hardware wallet. I think that, you then need to also think about the security of that hardware wallet itself. Make sure and are smart about how you look after the seed phrase associated with that hardware wallet. I think it's just a lot of standard practices. I think people definitely have gotten, especially the Solana, degen side of things, have gotten very sloppy. And the reality is, I'm sure 99% will get away with it. They'll get away with extremely sloppy OPSEC, hot wallets. Their friends know their passwords. They're like, giving the private keys to their friends to sell while they're asleep. And like, these are real things I have friends that do on a regular basis because they trust each other. But definitely got to be careful.
I think everyone learns their lesson either by listening to guys like us to get a hardware wallet and don't do that stupid stuff, or to get hacked. And for me, I got hacked way back in 2016 for some like 30 grand worth of pivots, which is a lot of money back to me back then. And after that, my crypto maintenance has been pretty stellar. I mean, as good as it possibly could be. That being said, I mean, if you're going to be a good trader in the space, you got to have a hot wallet moving around a lot of assets probably all the time. So I'll have some other people on that could give some advice on some of these things, but I know you want to kind of air gap some phones or some computers if you have a large amount of crypto, which is a good advice to do. You can buy these indestructible Chinese phones on eBay for pretty cheap, and then put them on airplane mode, and maybe take a picture of half a seed phrase, and then get another phone, take another picture of the half a seed phrase, and then move those around. It's some different types of points of failure you can use. But the key is
you could do the Do Kwon. You could do the Do Kwon, put it up there, and then hope no one comes for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting guy too. But yeah, I mean, crypto is a great space. Like my goal is to have a bunch of people on different age groups and different walks of life. I can't wait to have Rookie on here to tell his story and some other guys. But thanks for coming on, Nico. And look forward to having you. We're gonna have some quick trenches outlooks. I think if you can be on for those, I'd appreciate it. And maybe jump on for some stuff in the future.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. More than happy to jump on and chat about my schizo thoughts on the markets, whether they're right or wrong. I've been right recently, so let's hope that stays going. I'm pretty short right now on majors, but having fun on memes in the meantime. And yeah.
What do you think about the future of crypto? You think we're going to get another high this year, or you think we're going to be stuck in the 80s range for a year and a half?
Personally, I believe that we will get a pretty solid new high this year. It will most likely be into Q3, Q4. Let's just say somewhere in the ranges of like September to November, in my opinion. This was the traditional prediction and historically, I guess, accurate concept of like 4-year cycle type timing and stuff like that. And I think that you saw people at the start of this year when, Trump was launching his coin and Sol was at 290 and Bitcoin was going to 107. People were calling for, left translated, cycle's going to finish early. It's going to finish in March now, and then it's going to be over and all this kind of stuff. And I think I didn't believe that was going to be the case then. And now from the way the market's going, you can see that was not the case in the end. So I'm still kind of gunning for that more traditional towards the end of this year high. I know you maybe have some different thoughts around recession and stuff like that. I kind of agree. I do think that's very much on the table. I don't think that Trump is against getting a recession out of the way now at the start of his presidency as opposed to later on. I think that's probably fairly healthy. I still don't really feel like, since COVID, I don't think that we really had like a proper kind of recession and unwinding of some things that maybe we should have had. There was a lot of people calling for recessions, and you had, it was kind of like a mini recession. Like when you had people like Cardi B, like saying a recession's coming, that's when maybe the recession happened already. You know what I mean? Maybe it just didn't need to be that big, and that was it. But I don't know. You actually probably are a bit more attuned to the macro side of things than I am. I'm maybe a little bit too tunnel visioned on crypto.
I mean, my smarter trade friends like Keyboard Monkey and the other ones are kind of pretty bearish on the market from the macro stuff. I think Woods of Soho feels the same way. I know some of the bigger names are in stables right now, but I do think we're gonna get the highs by the end of the year. I don't necessarily agree with Keyboard. Actually, I have a bet with him. I think I have a 25K bet with him that will hit 100 before 69K. But he's pretty confident about it, so we'll see what happens. But apart from that, I that's why I hold spot. You got to be patient and wait and see what happens. But I do think if we rush over 100 again, I think it's a pretty good sign that we're gonna pump pretty big. But if we're just hanging around 80s and 90s and 70s, I think we're gonna be there for a while.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I think that we're going to get as horrible as it would be, but also great for buying dips like the kind of 70K lower. Maybe we wick into that range, that 70K range, but I don't think we stay there for very long. If I see 70K, personally, I think I'm a pretty big buyer in that range.
Yeah, I'm a big buyer. I have another bullet left, but like I'm a big buyer anywhere in the 70s or 80s. I do want to try to get some AI exposure or robotics exposure because I don't have any.
Cool.
But I'm concerned about AI and robots. So
it's just getting insane.
I need to do something about that. I don't know if you watched Elon Musk's like all hands meeting, but he said he's going to make 100 million robots a year, and that sounds wild to me. So
I'll look it up.
Stuff we got to look into for sure. That was probably like one of the most like you think you're watching like a historical event, like. We'll try to watch his like live stream of this all hands on deck meeting and talk about robotics, autonomous vehicles. If what he says comes true, like that, what I just watched was the historical event in the history of human beings.
This is the end of Q1 kind of recap, right?
Yeah, it was insane.
Okay, I got it up now. It's an hour long. I'll watch it tonight.
Yeah, and he said he's pretty confident he's going to be the most valuable company in the world. So it's like okay, well, I believe you, but I don't know.
Buying the dip. I'm buying the dip.
Yeah.
Never fade Elon.
Yeah. But pleasure to have you on, Nico. We'll be on touch again. And what time is it over there?
It's currently about midday. So I've got the rest of my day to smash out, make some money.
It's 9:20 p.m. over here.
Shorts are printing right now.
I'm flying into Bangkok tomorrow, so I'll be there for a week. So we'll be close.
Epic. All right,
brother.
Awesome.
Pleasure to have you. Thanks so much. Later, bro.
Thank you.